On May 29, 1453, the Roman Empire died. Not the ancient Rome you're thinking of. That empire never actually ended. It just relocated. And on this day, after 1,123 years, it finally fell. By 1453, Constantinople wasn't the glorious capital of legends. It was a ghost city. Population had crashed from 400,000 to barely 50,000. Most of the space inside those famous walls? Empty farmland. Here's why it mattered so much. Constantinople controlled the only route between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. If you wanted to trade between Europe and Asia, you went through this city, period. But here's the real problem. Constantinople had been weakened for centuries. Not by the Ottomans, by other Christians. In 1204, Catholic crusaders sacked the city so brutally, it never fully recovered. That betrayal created a permanent split. Catholics and Orthodox Christians hated each other more than they feared the Ottomans. When Constantinople begged the West for help in 1453, crickets. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, ruled over basically nothing. His entire empire? Just the city itself and a tiny strip of land to the west. That's it. That's the whole empire. But Constantinople had one thing going for it. Walls. Not just any walls, the most advanced defensive system on Earth. 2 lines of ramparts, 40 feet high, 16 feet thick, stretching for 4 miles, plus a massive chain across the Golden Horn Harbor, blocking enemy ships. These defenses had held for 1,000 years. Every army that attacked failed. Every siege broken. The walls were considered invincible. Enter Mehmed II. He was 21 years old. He'd been planning this siege since he was a teenager, and he had something nobody else had ever brought to Constantinople: artillery that could crack those walls. Constantine had maybe 7,000 defenders total. Some Genoese mercenaries, a handful of soldiers, and civilians grabbing whatever weapons they had. Mehmed showed up with 80,000 troops. It wasn't a fair fight. In early 1452, Mehmed started building a fortress on the Bosphorus. Not to attack, to starve. He cut off all supply routes into the city. Before a single shot was fired, Constantinople was already isolated. Here's what you need to understand. Constantinople didn't fall because of bad luck or heroic conquest. It fell because medieval warfare became obsolete overnight. Walls didn't matter anymore. Cannons changed everything. April 6, 1453. The siege begins. Mehmed surrounds the city on land and sea. But the weapon everyone's watching? A cannon so massive it took 60 oxen and 200 men just to move it. Mehmed's artillery couldn't fire fast. The cannons needed hours to cool between shots. But they didn't need to be fast. Every impact sent shockwaves through walls that had stood for 800 years. The defenders worked through the night repairing breaches. They packed gaps with rubble, timber, anything they could find. But for every section they fixed, the Ottomans opened 2 more holes. Then, Mehmed pulled off something nobody expected. That chain across the harbor, he bypassed it. He dragged 70 ships overland on greased logs behind the city's defenses. Now Constantinople was surrounded completely. Inside the city, morale collapsed. Constantine knew no relief was coming. The West wasn't sending help. He had weeks of food left and no way to get more. But he refused to surrender. By mid-May, sections of the outer wall were just rubble. The Ottomans launched assault after assault, trying to overwhelm the defenders with sheer numbers. Each time, Constantine's men somehow held. The Ottomans tried tunneling under the walls. Byzantine engineers detected it, flooded the tunnels, and collapsed them. They tried siege towers. The defenders burned them. Every tactic countered. For 53 days, this continued. Think about that. Almost 2 months of constant bombardment, constant assault, constant defense. The defenders were exhausted. Mehmed's own advisors told him to give up. Mehmed ordered one final assault. May 29th, before dawn. Everything at once. Infantry, artillery, ships, fire. This was it. Win or go home. The Ottomans hit the weakest section with everything they had. The breakthrough came through a small gate, a postern that someone forgot to lock. Ottoman troops poured through. Constantine saw his city falling. He stripped off his imperial insignia and charged into battle. Constantine died fighting. His body was never identified. The last Roman emperor went down defending the city that had been the heart of his civilization for over a millennium. That's how Rome ended. By nightfall, it was over. Mehmed entered the city on horseback and rode straight to the Hagia Sophia, the greatest church in Christendom. He declared it a mosque. Constantinople was now Istanbul. Here's why this moment changed everything. Historians literally mark 1453 as the end of the Middle Ages and the start of the modern era. One city falling redrew how we organize human history. Europe went into panic mode. If Constantinople could fall, any city could fall. Those walls were supposed to be invincible. Suddenly, every medieval fortress in Europe was obsolete overnight. The Pope called for another crusade to retake the city. It went nowhere. Turns out, Europeans were more interested in fighting each other than uniting against a common threat. Sound familiar? But here's the unexpected consequence. Thousands of Byzantine scholars, artists, and craftsmen fled west, taking their knowledge with them. They brought Greek texts, ancient philosophy, forgotten mathematics. This refugee wave supercharged the Italian Renaissance. All those lost Greek manuscripts. They'd been preserved in Constantinople for centuries. Now they flooded into Venice, Florence, Rome. The Renaissance exploded. Then there's the trade angle. With Constantinople under Ottoman control, Europeans lost their easy route to Asian spices and silk. They needed alternatives, so they started sailing west. Less than 40 years after Constantinople fell, Columbus reached America. That's not a coincidence. The fall of one empire forced Europe to discover two new continents. History is connected like that. And the military revolution? Cannons weren't just a Constantinople thing. Within decades, gunpowder artillery dominated warfare globally. Castles became tourist attractions. Armies modernized or died. For the Ottomans, this was their crowning achievement. Mehmed earned his nickname, the Conqueror. The empire would last another 470 years. Istanbul became one of the world's greatest cities, but for the people who lived through it, absolute catastrophe. This was their Rome, their civilization, their identity, gone in a day. Imagine Washington, D.C. falling and never being recovered. That's the scale. So what's the real lesson here? Technology changes everything. Alliances matter more than walls. And sometimes, the fall of one civilization creates the conditions for another to rise. That's the pattern of history. Here's my question for you. Was Mehmed a military genius, or just the first to weaponize new technology? Was this inevitable, or could Constantine have held out? Debate me in the comments, and subscribe for more history that actually matters.